Hey, so glad you're here. And so glad that like a new section of my closet opened up to me this morning. I feel scared to cheer because I feel like another week of 100 degrees is coming. But man, it's good. It's good. Sometimes I have to watch the YouTube video of me preaching the previous week to figure out what I wore. You know, does anyone ever fear like doubling up, going 2 weeks in a row in the same outfit? Yeah, well, I do. And sometimes I forget, but I'm glad that some sleeves. I'm glad for sleeves. Let's give it up for sleeves. Hey, despite being fed a very steady diet of cliches that are designed to boost your self-esteem. Despite being fed a steady diet of cliches designed to boost your self-esteem, those cliches are slogans, you could say. Things like, you know, you're perfect just the way you are, or you're enough. Despite reciting that over and over again, I don't know anybody who just wants to be themselves. These slogans and sayings are no match for our deep desire to change. This is why we have to tell ourselves and pay other people to tell us these things, because we just don't believe it, or maybe just don't want it. We desire change. We desire transformation. In Christianity, part of Christianity's appeal is its promise of just that. Its promise of change. Its promise of transformation. Preachers speak directly to a deep longing in humanity when they say you can leave the old behind and become brand new. It's like, oh, it's music to our ears. Again, I know that you have strengths, and I know that you have weaknesses, and I know that you're aware, probably more aware of your weaknesses than your strengths. So it's not everything that needs to change, but we're so aware of our inadequacies. And if you're not aware of your inadequacies, that is an inadequacy. And God's probably placed people in your life to be like, that's an inadequate approach to life. I was reflecting on Paul's words to the church at Corinth. It was messed up. And he says, we all who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory, we're being transformed into his image with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. We read this and think, oh, yes, please. The transformation spoken of in this passage is a metamorphosis. It's like it's made possible by the Spirit, and it's that word where we get the idea of a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. So we're transformed into something altogether different. It's not like caterpillars become a better caterpillar in the presence of God, but no, they're transformed into something, a new creature, something altogether different. And our hearts are like, yes, yes. Romans 8:29 are really kind of a Mount Everest of the New Testament. It says, for those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed into the image of his Son. What are you going to do when you retire? I don't know. Who are you going to marry? I'm not sure. How many kids will you have? Not real sure. But this we do know. You will be conformed into the image of his Son. That trajectory is set in your life. Those he predestined, he called, and those he called, he also justified, and those he justified, he also glorified. What a text. I don't even know. I mean, we all argue over what those words mean. But it's clear. God's got a plan. That's what that says. He intends to transform us. He formed us. He knit us together in our mother's womb. We've been deformed, haven't we, by this world and wounds and hurts and lies and things we've done and things that have been done to us. We've been deformed, and now he has a plan. He has an intentional plan to reform us and to remake us through his grace at work in our lives. Look at this text from 1 Thessalonians. Let's just enjoy this. May God himself, the God of peace, sanctify you through and through. May your whole spirit, soul, and body be kept blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. The one who calls you is faithful. He will do it. Let's just let that interrupt our to-do list that Tiffany just added to. The one who calls you is faithful. He will do it. I've gone through different phases and stages in my understanding of how we change, how we're transformed, how we're shaped. I think as a kid, I hoped it would be in a flash, right? It's like, I want to be zapped. Anybody ever want to be like, zzz? I just want to be done. Can I be transformed in a flash? In an instant would be awesome. And we know it's awesome because we give that guy the mic, and he's like, I flushed my drugs down the toilet. We're like, yes, in a flash, change us, God, overnight, do away. I was listening to a preacher that I love named John Tyson, and he was talking about how when he was a kid and he grew up in a Pentecostal church, one of the things that traveling preachers would say as they come through is they would lay hands on people's heads and say, never the same, never the same, never the same, never the same. And he always wanted to go back to those speakers and just tell them, like, that person's like still the same in all the ways that we hoped he would change. Like when that kid got prayer in our youth group and you said never the same, we were all like, yes, please. That kid ended up being the same in all the ways we would hope he would change. Never the same. On a more serious note, many people are deconstructing their faith because they believe Christianity over-promises and it under-delivers. And because they believed it would happen in a flash, they then turned to this idea. This view of change has also been my view at times, fatalism. When it doesn't happen in a flash, we become fatalistic, don't we? I'll probably be like this for the rest of my life. That is my Enneagram number, by the way. When we don't see the type of change we're hoping to see in a flash, we turn to a sort of fatalism, like it's not possible. Just learn to live with this. And many of us are looking at our loved ones, maybe looking at our spouses, maybe looking at ourselves and going, should I just learn to live with this? Should I be still trying to change this? Or should I just settle with a certain degree of brokenness in my life and in the lives of those around me? The Bible talks about you being shaped, and when it does, it doesn't use flash language very often, and it doesn't use fatalism. It uses fruit to describe how you change. It uses agriculture to describe the way that transformation takes place in our lives. And I think this is really helpful for us because fruit and its growth is invisible to the naked eye, is it not? It's not like anyone's ever saw an orange grow. Oh, I saw it. But we come back a couple weeks later and we're like, it's a different color. It's incremental, right? It's not large shifts, but also it is inevitable. The change is inevitable. You can't control it. Farmers don't actually grow fruit. They water, they spray, they tend, they create a certain context with the soil, but it's God who gives the growth. And I think that's what happens in our own lives too. We can't control this, but we can control the context and create a context, a fertile soil for something to happen. That's what's going on when we sing, "We give you permission, our hearts are yours." I know part of you are like, does God need permission? It's like, no. He doesn't even need to kick down the door. He doesn't need the door. He'll just go straight through whatever. He doesn't need permission. But what are we saying? We're saying, here I am. And I want my life to be a certain kind of soil, one that produces fruit. And so I'm surrendering before you. God doesn't need your permission, but we need to give him permission and say, here's my heart, Lord. Take it, shape it, form it, right? So formation, you will be formed. And I believe that we're formed by moments of incredible breakthrough. Moments like the one Tiffany described at the mountaintop, where God meets us in a profound way. And then we're also formed by the mundane. Anybody ever been shaped by the mundane? We're formed by these incredible sacraments and the practice of taking communion and going to the tank in baptism. We're formed by the practice of the sacraments, but we're also formed by the suddenlies of God. When he blows in, rushes in, steps in, everything shifts, and many of us have experienced that. You will be formed. You will be changed. Now, not every change that goes on in our lives is of God, right? My eyesight is slipping fast, Not every shift is of the Spirit, but you will be changed. That you're not going to be formed is a myth, or non-conformity, I should say, is a myth. You will be shaped and squeezed into some sort of a mold. I love it when people are like, no, man, I'm doing my own thing. And you're thinking, that's what every human being has done since Adam and Eve. Literally the first people on this planet said, I'm doing my own thing. Every human after that has said, I am doing my own thing. I assure you of this, write this down. You are not doing your own thing when you set out to do your own thing. You are being conformed. You are being squeezed into a mold. You are being shaped. I remember my wife, this is like 2018. We're reading about this personality test, the Enneagram. My wife's reading the book. And I say to her, you're not going to find me in that dumb book. And she says, that's kind of funny because one of the personality types thinks they can't be found in this dumb book. And I was like, give me that dumb book, And I took it. I felt so exposed. I genuinely thought I was doing my own thing. And there's like, no, there's so many millions of people like this that you are a whole category, I was reading the book and it was like, you read Catcher in the Rye in high school and you really loved Holden Caulfield. And I was like, that is the only book I read in high school and I loved Holden Caulfield, It's like, you shop at thrift stores. I'm like, what is going on right now? My whole world is crumbling. You're not different. You're the same as all the other people who think they're different. Like that's the point of this. The question is not, will you be shaped? The question is not, will you be formed? The question is, who or what's going to shape you? And who or what's going to form you? It's going on right now. It's not like, I'm not inviting you today to sign up to be formed. You will be shaped. You will be conformed into someone or someone's image. Even if you're like, yeah, rebellion, I'm going to rebel. It's like, come on, it's conformity. This can either be by accident or this can be by intention. And I would invite you to be shaped intentionally and not accidentally. Here's why. You're not an accident. You're the intention of a loving Father who formed you, created you for a relationship with Him. And now that we've messed some of that up because there's been some other formation in our lives, He has a plan by His grace to reform you, to reshape you, to renew you with His grace. And let me tell you, that plan has intention. It's not an accident. God's not like, well, I think it'll just happen. I think they'll just figure it out down there. No, He knows enough to know that we can't just figure it out down here. We're not just floating into this. This has to be with intention. Not many of the people that you admire have what they have on accident. They have it because of intention. They had vision in their lives. They had intention and means to bring that about, right? We all have a few friends that maybe have something you want without being intentional to get it, right? Everyone has that friend who can't gain weight, right? We hate them, you know? Everyone has that friend who's just picks something up and is good at it, you know? Most people have a smile, though, that you want because they floss. They do what nobody else does, you know? They brush their teeth, you know? And that's how they got what you want, you know? You look up here and you're like, oh, I want to play like this. I want to be fluent in these things. And no one just picked up an instrument and was fluent. There was probably gifting, but there was also intention. And they didn't come by this on accident. Oh, I just accidentally strummed that chord and it accidentally sounded good. That's not how this happens. It happens with a fair amount of intention. Can I ask you something? Because I brought up a bunch of shallow things, but man, people don't have the family you desire to have because they got it by accident. They don't have the relationships that you desire to have because they just floated into those. Their financial situation is the result, not of accident, but probably being very intentional in telling their money what to do, right? Now, there's more to it than that, and there's exceptions, but that's not the rule. The rule is that we get things through intentionally going after them. Can I ask you a question right now? If you received one of these, would you take it out? If you didn't receive one of these, you can hold your hand up and someone will bring one. But can I ask you, in these areas of your life, can you put the areas of life across the top of the screen? Could you rate yourself 1 to 10 in terms of 10 being intentional, 1 being there's very little intention in my life in this area? Can you answer for your work life? 1 to 10. 10 being I have a plan, 1 being like I don't know what tomorrow is. In your friendships, where are you at? 1 to 10. Just gut, don't think, just kind of answer. Marriage, where are you at? Is there intention? Or are you just hoping to have an amazing marriage by accident? And your parenting, are you just hoping your kids are going to turn out? Or do you have some sort of plan? In your diet, what's going on there? How intentional are you in your hobbies? And what about your discipleship? Do you have a plan to become more like Jesus? Where would you rank yourself 1 to 10 in those areas? I'm not going to give you long to do that, but please do so. Just like it would be pretty absurd to think you're just going to float downstream into playing guitar. And just like it'd be pretty absurd to think that you're just going to eat mayonnaise and get a six-pack. And just like that, it is pretty absurd to think that becoming more like Jesus is just going to happen to us. That there is no plan, there is no vision, there is no intention being put forth. We're accidentally going to float into this. Dallas Willard, who's kind of the guru of spiritual formation, says this: imagine, if you can, a person wondering day after day if he or she is going to learn Arabic, or if he or she is going to get married to a certain person, just waiting to see whether it would happen. That would be laughable. But many people actually seem to live in this way with respect to major issues involving them, including their spiritual growth. For the last year, we've been working on a definition of discipleship here at Radiant, one that we could pursue, one that we could put on the calendar, one that we could call people into. And discipleship is simply learning to live your life as if Jesus were living it. It's a little bit of that, WWJD thing going on. It's just an ongoing commitment to being formed into the image of Jesus Christ. It's an intention. Like you're going through your day and you're asking the question, how would Jesus run this company? If he were me, how would he be running this company? If he were me, how would he be dealing with this person? If he were me, how would he be raising these 5 kids? If he were me, how would he be attending this school? How would he be speaking in this situation? Our imaginations get fascinated with this. And it's this process that is discipleship. And it's massively important. I've been haunted by this quote for a lot of years, but Neil Cole says, ultimately, each church will be evaluated by only one thing: its disciples. Your church is only as good as her disciples. It doesn't matter how good your praise, preaching, programs, or property are. If your disciples are passive, needy, consumeristic, and not radically obedient, your church is not good. I'm going to let that haunt you like it's haunted me. Let's just sit in it. It's jacked up. So as we've been trying to find a way to describe and define discipleship at Radiant, we've come up with these 8 things. And here's the deal. First and foremost, we were asking the question, is it biblical? We don't just want it to be our brand, right? Do you play acoustic guitar? Do you wear flannel? Do you have some form of facial hair? We don't want it to be a brand. We want it to be biblical, right? But also at the same time, God gives unique calls on unique churches. I can see that in Revelation 2 and 3. He's got an intention and a plan for specific churches. So we do have to ask ourselves the question, not just is this true in Scripture, but is this true for us? Is this something God's spoken to us? Is this something that he's led us into in this day, in this community, in this place with these people? Is this true for us? I was also looking for a way to kind of summarize. If you've been here for any number of time, we've got this mission statement: to behold Jesus and put his brilliance on display by living lives that are obedient to the word, surrendered to the Spirit, and devoted to his mission. And we've used that since the start. But we've also talked about the 7 ways that we're members of this house together. And then last spring, we talked about the 6 ways that we want to be an Antioch church. And I was starting to honestly confuse myself. And if it's cloudy up here, it's probably worse out there. And so I was like, I want a way to summarize these things. This Antioch call on our house and the way that we're members together. And then also our definition of what discipleship is here in this house. So for those of you who are here and you're members of this church, our membership agreement is going to be changing slightly to represent just simply our discipleship definition. So if you're a member of this church, what that means is that you've said, I want to do those things, and I want to do those things with these people. Being a disciple and being a member aren't going to be two different things. We're going to invite you into one thing, which is to be a disciple. And being membered to this church is saying, I want to be held accountable to those things because I don't think I'm just going to float downstream into that stuff. I know sacrificial giving costs, and I know my tendency to pull away and only give out of my margin or excess. And so I want to sacrificially give. I also found myself thinking, can it be used from the cradle to the grave? I don't want a different definition of discipleship for our kids over there than we're embracing here. I don't want it to go like, well, I aged out of that. I'm retired. I retired from discipleship. We don't want that. So we want a definition that Eric Schlick can take and say, is this true for the youth? Is this true for our gap and our young adult? Is this true for our kids? Can it be flexible enough to apply to different ages and stages? Can it be measured? Like, is it specific enough to go, I did it or I didn't do it, which can be like really tough in the Christian walk, right? I find that pastors measure butts and bucks, not because they're greedy guys. There's just so little else you can measure in the church. You're like, well, is your church more holy? And you're like, oof, maybe? I don't know. How would I measure that, you know? And it's like, well, how many people are here when the Niners play? It's like, well, I don't know. I also wanted to just say, before we move on, that if you're here and you're interested in being a member at this church, you're saying like, oh, at the end of this, you're like, I want to be held to this, and I want to be held to this in this group. I want to spur one another on towards this. That we actually have an info dinner coming up next week at the Robertsons, and you can hear more about what we're doing. There'll be no pressure. We won't sell you on anything. This is an invitation to come and die with us. It is. It's an invitation to lose your life. There are no perks for the members of this church. It could become one. We'll show you. It's not. It's not like you get a jacket. It's not like that. It's an invitation, hopefully, to follow Jesus and to follow us as we follow him. So you can register for that. Come, hear more about it. Okay, here we go. Do you guys have this? Because I'm going to ask you to kind of plot yourself along this line. If you don't have a pen, the pen is in front of you in the pocket. Yeah, the pocket. The pouch. Hey, so the first thing we believe disciples do is they celebrate big. It's a glorious thing when the church gets together. That's a practice of, we're shaped as disciples through Sundays and through the conferences that we have and the holidays that we celebrate. Hebrews 10:23 says, let us hold fast to the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir one another up to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day coming near. Here's our hope for you, that you would choose a Sunday morning meeting and come consistently. Come consistently. And probably come to the 9 or the 10:45. We've all had that experience, right, where someone's like, I go to Radiant. And you're like, you don't go to Radiant. They're like, yeah, no, I promise. And then it takes a little while, but you're like, wait, do you go to the 9? And they're like, no, I've never been to the 9. I go to the 10:45. We want that to happen. We want you to be known, and we want you to be noticed when you're not here. And when you float between those two services, it can be trouble. So pick one and decide to come consistently. Can I say one other thing? Could you come on time? I don't say that for me because I go second, but it's really hard to watch the worship team put all this effort into a meal that goes cold because you don't come to the table. I mean, they pour their guts into this. Like, this isn't just like, oh, I'm just winging it this morning. They've thought, they've prayed, they want to put a feast before you, and you're coming to the table and it's cold and needs to be microwaved. Could you come on time? It communicates value. Not to the worship team necessarily, although they're valuable, but like, Lord, I'm here. I think this is important, and I want to come. If you're planning to miss for a long time, could you let someone know? It matters when you're not here. And then could you invite people into what we're doing? Most people are super up for investing in their lives and inviting them to something that we're doing. So these are questions to consider as you plot yourself along that line. How many times do you attend worship services a month? By the way, if you're here and you're not a disciple of Jesus, you don't have to do this. You're like, what the heck? If it's your first time and you're exploring Christian faith, that's so awesome. We're hoping to be the type of people that you would go, I want to do that, and I want to be like that. Have you invited someone to church in the last 6 months? Secondly, connect small. Life is shared and I am known. This happens primarily in our packs and classes. And I'd love to read you a long text, but time doesn't permit. Are you a part of a group? Are you a part of a pack, a class? Do you have a church within this church? I'd love for you to have church within this church. A crew that you're doing life with. It can't be everyone, but it can be someone. Do you participate in the men's and women's events? Those are amazing ways to build relationships. Do you feel connected relationally in this church? Why or why not? Go ahead and mark yourself along those lines. Thirdly, you're marked by moments as a disciple, transformed by encounters and experiences. That would be baptism, communion, our New Day event, Man Camp. I think the daddy-daughter dance is something that is marking us. Disciples are transformed by encountering the risen Lord. And we uniquely encounter Jesus when we come to the table and get baptized in the tank. There's a unique encounter that happens in that. These have been instituted by the Lord himself and are a part of our discipleship process. But we also desire, as I said, these mountaintop experiences where our lives are forever marked by his power and his presence. These things are super pivotal in the life of a disciple, although they can't be predictable. Like, there's no manipulating God. If we sing loud enough, he comes. Now, that's not the way it works. He does what he wants to do. But here's what I want to say to you. You can position yourself under the faucet. Do you understand what I'm saying? You can sit in the splash zone. Are you in charge of getting wet? No, you're not. But you can sit in a place that if God, and I'm not talking about the first 4 rows. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a posture of heart where you could put yourself in eager expectation that if God's going to speak, I'm listening. Speak now, Lord. Your servant's listening. I want to hear. I want to know you. And I'm living with an expectation that God can shift everything suddenly. And I haven't turned to a fatalism that says, well, I'm going to be this way for the rest of my life. I'm going to be what you say I am, and you can shift that in seconds if you want to. I want the whole church, the disciples of this church, postured in that way, not renouncing the mundane, but believing for these moments. Have you been baptized? It's not an option. If you're a follower of Jesus, a disciple of Jesus, you must be baptized. Ask it in your packs this week. Have you been baptized? Well, it's just I've been a believer for 20 years. It feels weird. Seems like all the kids or people who just came to faith do it. No, you must be baptized. Spiritual disciplines. Be with Jesus, be like Jesus, prayer, Bible reading, solitude, community. Do you have practices or rhythms that provide you with a place to meet with Jesus? Can you connect with God on your own, or are you dependent upon gathering with others? What's one discipline you've added to your life in the last year? Do you have a practice of spiritual disciplines? Spiritual gifts. Serving here is propelled by the power of the Spirit. Mercy, prophecy, discernment, teaching. Where would you rank yourself in the spiritual gifts? Do you know what spiritual gifts you've been given? Do you see how those gifts serve both inside and outside the church? And are you currently serving in the church? And are you serving according to the grace gifts that you've been given by God? Or if you're not aware of those, that'd be an awesome thing this year to go, now I want to understand the spiritual gifts I've been given, because everyone possesses at least one. Sacrificially give. Generosity is a priority for me. I invest financially. Tithing, special offerings, and sharing with those in need is a part of my life. Is giving a priority for you? Do you give first, or is it like, if there's something left or a little extra, I'm going to give? Is giving a percentage for you, so that when your income goes up, your standard of living isn't the only thing that goes up, but your standard of giving also goes up because you've determined this is percentage? What interferes with you giving more consistently? Write that down. You bear witness to Jesus. My words and deeds point people to Jesus. At work, at home, on the field, from the bedroom to the boardroom, my life is a testimony, and it says Jesus is Lord of my life. When was the last time you shared your faith and declared the gospel in word? What are the names of 3 people that you're praying for in hopes that they would come to know and worship Jesus? When was the last time your lifestyle caused someone to consider the validity of Christianity? Just the way you lived your life made them think maybe Jesus is alive. There's something up with this guy, this gal. Are you aware of any areas of your life that are out from under the lordship of Jesus, that fail to rep him? Lastly, make disciples of Jesus. I'm faithful to pass on what I have received. Willing to multiply, willing to make room. When people think about discipleship, they think about loving like Jesus did. They think about living like Jesus did, but they never think about leaving like Jesus did. He had to leave things behind. And then he called his disciples to do the same thing. Throw down your nets. What is something that you would have to leave behind? Because for me, man, once something's good, it's like the last thing I want to do is mess with it. It's like, I love this group. I love these people. I'm good. And our good Lord invites us to leave behind things that are good because he's saying, go. Make room. Multiply. Ultimately, we're coming to the table right now. Would you stand with me? Ultimately, we do this because we serve a God. That magnificent Trinity that wasn't like, no, we're good. We have the ultimate small group in heaven. No, they said, we're going to make room for people to enjoy, and we're going to go. We're going to take responsibility for things that aren't our problem, and we're going to redeem. And then Jesus called together a group of 12 guys. And I'm sure they were like, I don't like these guys. I wish that you would have chosen. Some of these guys, I like these guys. Some of these guys, I don't like these guys. But I guarantee you, after 3 years of being with Jesus and being formed by Jesus, they were probably like, this is my crew. I love these guys. But then those guys went. They broke up. They spread out. Thomas is like, I'm going to India. Gotta go. And they sacrificed. They laid down these core relationships in order to go and make room and teach and faithfully pass on what they received. And we're here a couple thousand years later because people have made room for us. They passed on what they received. Is that where you're at? Are you giving away what you've received? Not do you have enough? That's not what I asked. Not do you understand completely? I'm asking, are you giving away what you do understand? And are you faithful to teach the things that you've learned? Because we'll never have learned it all. After you're done with this, I'd love you to make your shape, like connect the dots in some sort of circle. And just take a good look at the shape of discipleship in your life. Is it long and skinny? Is it lopsided? And then where would you like to grow? Because we're going to continue to have this conversation over and over again. Jesus, we thank you for your commitment to us. Thanks for not giving up on us. Thank you for the ultimate expression of that, being that you shed your own blood. You're not interested in just telling us what to do. You showed us. And you've empowered us with your Holy Spirit. So as we come, reflect and remember you at the table and remember the work of your cross, would people hear you whisper in their ears, "Come follow me, and I'll make you a fisher of men." Amen.